Thank you so much for being here, Nisha. This is such an amazing topic, and I'm so glad that you reached out and that we've connected, because I think our listeners are really going to enjoy this. And I think that this is a topic that most listeners and teachers don't really think about because it is fairly new and it's not as common as the conversation. So I think this is going to be really amazing. But before we dive in deep, just tell us more about yourself and what you do, and we can go from there.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm uh, really looking forward to the conversation. So my name is Nisha. I am an engineer by training. I've been, doing software engineering for a long time, and I've been in the artificial intelligence space for about 7 years now. And I used to actually work for, in more of the enterprise side of artificial intelligence, which is, helping large companies build, safe and, well-behaved AIs. About 2 years ago, I started this company, Pixida, which is, runs the website called AI Club.World. And we focus on AI education primarily for K through 12.
Mhm.
And so that's what we do.
Cool. Has there always been an online space to share that education with students, or do you guys push into schools with different products as well?
So we actually do both. So we had both prior to the pandemic. We both had on-site as well as online classes, and then obviously, with the pandemic, we moved everything online. But we're also in a number of schools now, and school districts that are also, sending students
Oh, that
to.
is so cool. So do
Okay.
they interact with like how does the platform work, or like how do like what does a typical lesson look like for kids?
Oh, absolutely. So one of the things that has happened in the last few years that we've also built upon with some of the technology that we built is to make it very, very easy for kids to build AI. And so the
Oh.
approach that we take is really a very top-down approach, where the idea is every student in all of our classes builds an AI on their first day.
Oh,
You
Oh,
wow.
wow.
And what we do is we basically build a very simple one, which is let's build an AI to predict whether you're happy or sad
Huh.
based on things that you type in. And the nice thing about it is that it doesn't take very long to build, but it gives them a really good understanding of what it means to teach an AI. And
Yeah.
then they learn what it knows, what it doesn't know. Then they learn that they can teach it and make it better, stuff like that. And
Ah.
so that approach has worked out really well. We do it with students from fourth grade up. So we
Yeah.
teach fourth grade to 12th grade. And all of them are extremely hands on, all of them are extremely interactive, and obviously the more senior students get deeper very quickly.
Yes.
They're able to appreciate more of the internals because they can understand the programming and the math, but the younger students can still appreciate the notion that that AI has to learn, that it
Yes.
has to be taught, that it can make mistakes, right? And
Mhm.
that there's a role for a human in that process and things like that. And so that's the approach, and it's worked out really well because when they build something and it becomes their own, and particularly the moment they teach an AI something and it's very much what they've taught it, they have a very personal interest in seeing it better and therefore learning how it works. And so
That
that's
is,
the approach that
that's
we've
all.
taken, and that's
That's
Yeah, that
cool.
I was just gonna say the part that like kind of stood out to me, and I don't know why, but it just kind of does because I'm kind of like a math freak. You were talking about the math. So I know I was gonna ask you to kind of explain what an AI is, but I feel like you kind of did that. So like the math concept for the younger students, what does that kind of look like? Just because I'm very interested in that.
Yeah. So what happens is that we've tailored our curriculums to kind of match what students naturally learn in math and their
Okay.
school. So our elementary curriculum, for example, has no math in it.
oh,
So
okay.
they learn the AI concepts more about AIs need to learn. AIs can
Um,
make predictions and decisions based on what they learn. The AIs can be taught. How do you teach an AI? How do you know if it's made a mistake? Stuff like that. When
okay.
it comes to middle school and they've done maybe just a little bit of, they can understand concepts like percentages and accuracies and ratios and things
Mm.
like that. Then they can understand that if an AI has 80% accuracy, it means that it got 80% of its questions right.
Okay.
Oh.
Wow.
Appreciate
Okay.
that.
That's super because I know like we were talking about earlier, my students did like some AI activities this year. And one thing I tried to teach, and you probably can give me some more insight on this, so this makes me kind of excited so I can teach it better, is they were kind of like, well, how does it know like if I give it this, then it needs to do this? And we talked about if then statements kind of before that. And I'm like, you kind of got to think of it as an if-then statement, but you're training it to know like if, because the program we were using, it was like, if it does this, then this happens. And so they were kind of like set to kind of training it. And I related it back to that if-then statement. Is that something that's like true, you would say?
Yes, in some sense, yes.
Oh,
So the
that makes me feel good.
yeah, so the way that we actually we teach this is that we help students understand that AI is a way to solve their problems and not always the right way. And what we call rules are another way. So for example, if you know something like, if it is hot, I'm not going to go out. If it is cold, I'm going to go out, or something like that. You don't really need an AI for that. That's a rule.
Right.
Now, the place where AIs become important is when the thing is sufficiently complicated that it's hard to write rules. So, for example, say that I told you that I'm going to type any English sentence I feel like typing, and you're going to tell me whether it's happy or sad. Your brain can do that trivially, right? Your brain somewhere along the way learned to make a judgment call, right or wrong. But if you try to write a rule, what am I going to do? Look for the word sad. It may not be in there.
True.
I might say I feel terrible, which clearly means I'm sad, but the word sad isn't in there. Now, am I going to look for the word terrible? That may not be in there either.
Wow, yeah.
So what we basically teach students is, if you can come up with a rule, use a rule, because they're usually better.
Right.
If you try to come up with a rule and you can't find one, AI is really good at stuff like that. It's good at finding patterns that are hard for humans to express.
That is so cool too, because I feel like you could relate that to many subjects, like you said, in those sentences. And like you could even talk about, words that are similar but mean the same thing. And that's so cool too, because like it's something that you could teach in multiple subjects, which is what, a lot of times we talk in here, because like the number one thing we hear from teachers is like, well, it's so hard to teach this in my day as if I already don't have enough going on. But we're always talking like cross-curricular. How can we, add this in? And like the examples you gave, I thought were so perfect for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things I think we really liked, is that, AI can be applied in many ways, right? It can be applied to science, it can be applied to medicine, it can be applied to math, for example. And one of the exercises that some of our kids do is we teach an AI math. Like, supposing an AI did not know how to compute an average, and you teach it. And what you realize when you teach it is that it never actually learns that it's an average. It just creates a pattern that's almost identical.
Oh, wow. I didn't ever think about that.
And so it's like, say you taught an AI to figure out the average of 4 numbers. All the students in middle school know that you multiply everything by a quarter and you add it up and you got your average. The AI will come up with something extraordinarily close to a quarter, but not quite.
Oh
wow. I guess I've never even thought about it that it's considered like a pattern like that. It's kind of mind blowing if you think of it that way.
Yeah. So that's another way to think about it. If the pattern is obvious, no need to involve an AI.
Right.
It's patterns that are not obvious, so that it can tell you if there's a pattern there that you may not even be able to see.
Wow. That is incredible. Naomi, before you do your next question, this is a great time for us to pause for one of our favorite segments, the Innovative Teacher Corner.
Okay, so I love hearing this cross-curricular and how to break it down for students. And when you and I were talking previously, it came up that like the etiquette when you're speaking to AI, the ones that can communicate back to you. And so when I was talking about this with 5th grade a little bit, we were talking about digital citizenship. And at least in my class, there was half and half. It was split. Some students felt that it's okay to not talk nice to Siri. Like some kids thought that, and the nicest kids too. I was surprised. They're all, well, I'm nice all the time. I never get to talk mean to anybody. So Siri's my chance to do it. And I'm all, and it's like this nice, quiet kid. I'm like, whoa, okay. And then other kids said, no, you shouldn't be practicing being rude. Like you should always be nice no matter what. So what kinds of, you've written an article about this that I think our listeners should read, but like, what are your thoughts and what have you heard about like that etiquette when it comes to AI in our world? Because it's not going to go away.
I'm super excited to hear about this because Naomi told me about this yesterday, about your article. And I was like, I want to ask my students this, but I want to know how to approach it because I'm like, I think this is super interesting because I'm going to be honest. Sometimes I'm mean to Siri, like when I get really mad, and now I feel bad about it and I feel guilty a little bit. So
yeah, no, it's an interesting question, and I wrote it. I wrote the article partly because I have a 12-year-old daughter. So
Yeah.
a lot of what I did for AI Club kind of came from my personal experiences teaching her,
Uh-huh.
and my discussions with her about various things, including this topic. And I mean, like many things involving AI, it's kind of an open question, right? And what I typically try to tell students is it's not so much that I have the right answer, but they should realize that they should have an opinion.
Oh.
And the fact that they have an opinion and maybe they can understand what's good or bad about each position is probably the more important thing.
Ah.
Not so much that you must do this or you must do that. Now, the lines of thought around this topic are very kind of interesting. So, on one hand, I think there are a group of people who kind of feel like you should not be, as AIs become closer and closer to sounding like humans, they're not, and not even close to being
And
anything
yeah,
human,
kids
but
get
they sound like it. Maybe
confused.
it's not a good practice to teach children how to be rude to them because it suggests that maybe they might be rude to a human later.
Uh-huh.
And
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
and there's an open distinction among young children about whether young children fully even appreciate that this is not a person.
Uh-huh.
Do they know that it's a computer, or do they think it's a person somewhere else who's talking to them through a little box?
Yeah.
Do we
I
really know which
yeah,
one it is?
that was one of the questions, like, how would you explain AI to a little kid? That was one of the discussion topics because yeah, little kids think it is a person. Not all, but a lot of them do.
Well, so one thing I've kind of noticed, when I've been teaching, even fourth graders, is they're surprisingly perceptive. They know it's not in
Yeah.
fact, they may be more perceptive and more aware of how to handle an Alexa than their parents, just because they know how it is with kids,
I know
right?
how to order
So,
things.
yeah, so they're, so I think they're quite capable of picking it up. But those are, I think, some of the trade-offs. Now, one of the things, I think the nice things that you can maybe notice is the assistants are getting kind of, they're able to talk back. And they're being they're being intentionally programmed to not, to basically kind of temper the thing.
Uh-huh.
And some assistants, I'm not going to name names, but some assistants are more polite than others.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
And you can kind of
that's a
get
fact.
kind of you can rate the attitude level of an assistant based on
Is there like something like with the science of making them sound more human like are they trying to make them sound more like you're interacting with a human? I know there's a whole work around that. I mean, just that human piece.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, in some of our classes, particularly with the younger students, we play a little game where we just share with them the audio of two people talking. And we ask them which one is the human, and it's surprisingly hard to tell.
Oh.
And it's basically a person calling to make a haircut appointment. So there's, on one hand, there's someone making an appointment. There's another person at the hair salon trying to find them a good slot. And the two of them are having a conversation. And this, by the way, is a demo from Google from more than 2 years ago.
Yes,
Oh,
I've
wow.
heard that
I need
demo.
to find this.
Yes. It's so creepy, but they're trying, I mean, if it can perform a task, I mean, that way it could free up that simple task for that hairdresser example.
So, and the kinds of things that we typically kind of ask students is, so what could you tell? And if you couldn't tell, why couldn't you tell? Like, what was it in the mannerisms, right? That made it so hard to tell, because the AI doesn't sound like a robot anymore. It doesn't say like, I must make haircut appointment or something like that. It basically like, hey, I'm so-and-so, can I get a haircut? Just like
Yeah.
human
Right.
might. And so, and then the next question, that we typically ask kids is, what do you actually think about that? Like, if somebody were to call you and you don't know if you're talking to a human or a robot, is that okay? Is that not okay?
Yeah.
And try to kind of get them thinking, because the answer is not clear. The opinion, that sort of the having an opinion, or learning that you probably should have an opinion, given that these are going to be questions of the future, is probably more important.
Yeah.
Right.
You're right. There isn't a set
That's
yes or no on that.
one of the things you said that kind of stood out to me. You were saying like, AI kind of, when you're with the younger kids, is kind of how you approach it, like how they feel about it. Because I feel like it's a really interesting topic.
Mhm.
How young of an age do you think you can kind of start introducing kids to, like, how do we approach this and start having kind of that talk around having an opinion about it?
So I think the youngest students that we've taught are about 8 years old.
Because I'm
Yeah.
curious, because like I know my third graders are really like intrigued by it this year.
Okay.
But like it's really weird. Like my fourth grade, I don't know it's the kind of students they are, but they're not near as intrigued by that as they are other things. So I'm like kind of curious, like what age groups and like how they're feeling and just different cool activities like that Google Voice thing. Cause I never heard of that. And I'm like, now I want to go do that like tomorrow.
Mhm.
So what happens is, so we've created curriculums for grades 4 and such, but we're starting to see demand in grades 2 and 3 as well. Because
Okay.
I think it's possible to have the conversations and have, do some of the exercises and get them thinking. So,
Mhm.
and some of the tools, are so easy to use that, particularly one of the reasons why we kind of, focused on this is because we built some tools ourselves.
Mhm.
So the tools that we built are built to be very easy for kids to use. And so because of that, enabled us to sort of go further down in the age group and kind of target, the level of depth that that would be
Mhm.
right for them. So
Right.
yeah, so those
That's
are some of the things.
that's mind blowing to me. Like I feel like I'm learning so much from this. I always say that every time we interview everyone, but everything's always so interesting to me, and especially this because I kind of started teaching this year, but I don't know a lot about it yet. So I guess another great question for the teachers out there that are listening, and we even have some like homeschool teachers and parents who try to do enrichment activities. Why would you say it's important for kids to kind of learn about AIs?
So a couple of things. I mean, first of all, it's all around them even now,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to be even more around them as they grow up. And because it's becoming so pervasive, really there are many jobs out there that will have some elements. You don't have to be in computer science to find this in your future. It'll be in the future of medicine, production, farming, you name it, it's going to be in there. So, I consider it a new type of literacy. So the same way that coding is a kind of literacy, AI literacy is basically about sort of this concept that information is all around you, and information about you particularly is being gathered by people all around you, and it's being used in all sorts of interesting ways to interact with you. And so it's really helpful for people to just have a working knowledge of how that works.
Yes.
And if you decide not to go into a technical field, like, if you go in to Amazon and it recommends that you buy socks, probably should know where that came from.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
true.
Why did Amazon think I want socks today?
Mm.
What exactly did I do to give it that impression? So
Exactly. And I mean, I feel like you hit the nail or the nail on the head. Did I say that backwards? I feel like I did. But anyways,
Hammer on the nail. I don't
I
know.
know. I don't know why. I feel like I said that. Yeah, that was bad, but that's okay. That happens. You're talking about like it look almost being like a literacy standard. And I feel like 4 or 5 years ago, I remember when I was learning how to code and I was really excited about it. I'm like, these are going to be standards someday. When I hear AI now I'm like, it's going to be 2 or 3 years and we're going to see like coding standards, but I think AI is going to be in those
Yeah.
standards. I really do believe that because I think, we didn't have coding standards for the longest time. And now it's like, you know what, we have those standards, you need to teach it. And I think this is what's going to be next, like you said, because it's all around us and it's only going to go up as far as awareness, jobs, and kids being exposed to it for sure.
absolutely, yeah. So I think is the key, sort of AI literacy, and sort of being able to kind of enable that. And then how deep they go depends on what they choose to do in their
Mm-hmm.
careers. But that basic literacy and the ability to sort of, it's kind of, there's a lot of hype out there, about AI, but it's really, I mean, it's very exciting, but it's not the hype that,
Right.
and things like that. Like robots are not going to invade your house
Yeah.
tomorrow, anything like that. At the same time, chances are you used one this morning and didn't realize it.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's, I think, is that what we're trying to help students understand is what the reality is, and that they're open questions.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And give them a chance to form an opinion about the open questions, not necessarily
Yeah.
to answer.
And I
Right.
think it's cool too how you kind of talked about, how it's an open discussion and talking about it because I feel like that's when I think AI, I never thought about something like that, like a conversation around it as much as I did like, what are some different things we can build and do, which is important, but I feel like it's good to have a discussion around it because now I'm thinking of like, oh, I used this morning.
Yeah.
Well, you can consider that an AI. Just like you said, you don't even realize you're using them until you kind of have this discussion about it. And I think the kids would think that's so neat and that would kind of like for them be like, oh, and it would complete that full circle for them to kind of think about, how they use AIs in their everyday life and why it's important.
Yeah, exactly. So I think just kind of combining those two, which is giving them exercises where they can actually build one, create
Mm-hmm.
one, interact with it, teach it, make it better, relate the concepts they're learning to things they use every day. Like, okay, how is this
Yep.
related to how an Alexa works? things like that. So that builds up that foundation. And one thing we've noticed is that it seems to greatly increase students' interest in coding and in math.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
yes.
Appreciate the fact that, oh, they want to control this better. They want to actually build something bigger. And guess what? I want to do some coding so that I can build a bigger thing, or
You
I want to learn some math so that I can figure out how this thing actually works. And so part of it is that I find coding and math naturally interesting. I don't really
Mhm.
need an application to find it fascinating, but many kids do.
Right.
So learning it in the context of something you're trying to build is, motivates a lot of people.
Were you saying when we were talking before that when you were working with your daughter that the girls were really
If you're still in the building.
Naomi's at school for all those nice listeners out there. It cut her out.
I know. You were saying that the girls were really catching on to the AI. Is that what you were telling me before?
Yes. So one of the things that we've kind of noticed is, and I've noticed this with my daughter as well, is many girls, they tend to be interested in solving problems, right? Particularly like social problems, scientific problems, problems in their community. And so they start with the problem and then they apply the technique. So they may not be necessarily interested in building a robot or something. So one of the things that I've found really great about AIs is that it's really easy to relate to a student something in the real world they care about, and explain to them how this technology helps them solve that problem. So in all of our classes, for example, and we're introducing this even at grade 4, is they build a custom project.
Cool.
Something that is their own, that is their idea. And as the students are older, the projects are obviously more deeper, more varied, and things like that. But at the same time, it's a way for them to apply directly to something they care about, and that makes the concepts kind of come alive. And this is particularly interesting for girls, I think, because they have very strong interest in design, building an end solution, things like that. And so it brings the technology to the girl in a very nice way that works for.
Oh,
for them.
definitely.
Yes.
Oh, for sure. It's just so cool, like how there's just all these other avenues and ways to go about it. A new club that maybe some teachers might want to try if they're too scared to try it as a whole class. Clubs are great options to try something new. And then the next year you're more comfortable adding it maybe in your curriculum. But that is so just so interesting.
It really is. Is there any, like, we always like to at the end, since we're wrapping it up kind of here, where can our listeners find you? And then if there's any really exciting projects that you would like them to know about that are coming up.
Sure. So I think where we find you, our website is http.aiclub.world. And our Twitter handle is at AI Club.W. And so you can also list my email address, on
Yeah,
Twitter.
we'll put in the notes, all that stuff.
Yeah, you can put them in. And exciting projects that we're working on. So we've actually created a small set of curriculums that we're handing out to teachers who are interested in trying out AI in the classrooms. And so it's about a 1-hour exercise. It's actually 40 minutes, but 1 hour if you buy yourself a little bit of time. And so we've had hundreds of students try this out in the last 2 weeks or so.
Oh, wow.
So that's something that if your teachers are interested, it's completely free. So,
wow.
And it comes with basically kind of a full lesson guide, videos, exercise, free accounts and stuff like that. And it might be a great way for teachers to, just try it out in their classrooms and see how the kids feel and have a discussion.
Right. Wow. That sounds incredible. I know I'm really interested in doing that now that you said that. So thank you so much for being with us today and chatting with us and teaching us a little bit about AIs and really trying to get the teacher world to do the same.
Thank you very much for having me. This is a great call.
Yeah, it was so much fun. We loved creating this episode for you today, Innovative Teachers, and we would love to be at your school this year. That's right. We are opening our PD and our calendar is booking up fast. So make sure you reach out to us at innovativeteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Do you have a teacher business and you're looking for partners? Well, you can reach out to us for that as well, as we have our Innovative Teacher Corner opened up for many episodes coming up. If you're interested in collaborating with us, you may also reach out to us at the innovativeteacherpodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe and follow us on all social media. And lastly, if you want some resources, make sure you check out our exclusive Patreon group where you can just pay $5 a month, the small, like a price of a coffee a month, for some STEM resources. We loved making this episode. Thank you for listening today, Innovative teachers, we will see you in the next episode.